Hi, everyone. Welcome. Tonight we have Maggie Tokuda-Hall in conversation with Sarah Wendell, and this event is in support of our new Read It Forward program. Maggie is the author of The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea. Sorry, my computer just freaked out, which is a new young adult fantasy novel, and it has received 3-starred reviews and is an IndieBound bestseller.
Yay!
Sarah, yay, amazing. Sarah is the co-founder of the website Smart Bitches Trashy Books, which discusses and reviews romance books. And The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea is part of Read It Forward, a book donation program launched by Belmont Books in May to provide new books to students in Belmont, Arlington, Watertown, and Waltham, who, because of the pandemic, have been cut off from access to books. We chose The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea for Read It Forward because our booksellers love this book and wanted students quarantined during the pandemic to be able to read this amazing new novel full of magic and adventure. We hope that you will consider making a donation to Read It Forward to help us continue the program through the summer and beyond. Just go to our website at belmontbooks.com/read-it-forward, and at belmontbooks.com you can also buy the book for yourself. Belmont Books is located in Belmont Center, and both the bookstore and cafe are open for curbside pickup. We have some more great virtual events coming up this month, which you can see at belmontbooks.com/event. Before we hear from Maggie and Sarah, just some quick housekeeping. You can send questions through the Ask a Question function at the bottom of the screen, and they will answer them at the end of the event. Or you can send comments, which I think you've already figured out how to do, in the chat box on the side. This event will be recorded just for us to have.
Well, now we're in trouble, Maggie.
Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the event.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca. Welcome, Maggie. I get to see you and talk to you because we did an interview a couple weeks ago, and I'm so glad to get to talk to you again. How you doing?
I'm doing so well. I'm so excited to talk to you again. I think it's very generous of you to be willing to talk to me not once but twice.
Oh, I'll talk to you anytime, especially about lipstick, eyeliner, books, gender fluid pirates. We have many topics. Now, I am pinch hitting for Amanda, who actually works at Belmont, and she had a family emergency. So I wanted to send my warmest and best wishes out to her because she's dealing with really tough family stuff. But I get to step in and talk about pirates and octopuses. Wait, octopi, right?
I had a second grade teacher correct me at a school visit to octopuses. So I will never say octopi again. Apparently both are actually correct, though.
I'm with octopi. I think octopi. And if you're watching and you want to vote on which one is right, I would appreciate your octopi. Thank you, Claudia.
I have asked like an actual cephalopod scientist, and she said both are correct. But I have only been corrected for one in public, so I will always use
octopus. Really awful. I'm sorry.
It was so embarrassing. Like in front of all the children too. I'm like, hi, I'm here. I'm an expert. And she was like, it's always octopuses, not octopi. Thank you for coming. And I was like, thank you. I'll just curl in a ball and die now.
No, that's not cool. That's not cool at all.
Oh,
it was always right.
I
mean, okay, when I'm the speaker, I'm always right?
Fair enough. Yes.
So I know that you were a bookseller, and I know that you have worked for many years in independent bookselling, and you've done a lot of book events from the other side. Now you have a book out, and we're all at home with earphones, virtual events. How has it been for you? Is it both great and awful, as many authors have told me?
Yeah, I would say that's like exactly accurate, because like the awful part are the obvious things where it's like you would do events and all your friends would come and you'd go get drinks after and it would be great. It's a good time. But there's been silver linings. Like I got to do my launch party with 2 authors who I super admire. One of whom was coming in from France on the Zoom.
Nice.
So like as nice and as cool as she is, I don't think she was going to fly in from France for me, a person she had never met before. If it had not been pandemic times. So
exactly. You get international connection, and you don't have to wear shoes. You may not even have to wear real pants. Like you could wear pajama pants. Who's going to know?
Exactly. Like I just put on the eyeliner and it's like everything from there down. Who knows? It's fine.
Oh yeah, I'm wearing some very funky pants from Etsy right now. I will not show them to you, but they're very comfortable. No shoes. It's super easy. I just go upstairs. But on the other hand, I did an interview with author Sarah Gailey for my podcast this week.
You're a pal of mine. That's awesome.
It's such a fun interview. But we talked about how book release during the pandemic means that you do all the solitary part.
Yeah.
But then the promotion is also kind of solitary too, and you don't get that sort of feeling of coming together as much.
No. Although as somebody who finds being the center of attention in real life like pretty uncomfortable, this is a little bit easier because just seeing comments on the side is like heartening and a lot less terrifying than just a room full of people being like,
yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's really exciting to see people like chatting on the side. Like I'm like, I kind of want to stop and be like, hi, everybody, how are you? So I'm so glad people have come out to hang out with us virtually today. And, you know, we're on opposite sides of the country, so I couldn't have done a live event. This is pretty great.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
This is awesome.
Nice to be here with you.
Thank you. So I want to ask you about both of your books because I imagine that I know, knowing myself and my neighbors and my friends, even though I read books like The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, I also buy a lot of children's books. So I want to ask you about both your books. And it occurred to me when I read both of them that you kind of like story a little bit.
Yeah, that's the only thing. And like unsettling sea creatures. Those are the two things my picture book and my novel have in common. After that, it's over. Also, An Octopus is a picture book that is a story about how to tell stories by telling a story about an octopus who wants to fly in a purple shining spaceship and go to other galaxies.
It's so cute.
Thank you.
As you do.
Yeah. Which I wrote while I was an independent bookseller and when I was in the heat of doing school book fairs full time.
Oh, dude.
So I worked for a company called Books Inc., which is a chain of bookstores around the Bay Area. And we would do these school book fairs all over the Bay Area. So I would leave my apartment sometimes at like 5:45 in the morning to get to Menlo Park by 7 a.m. for preschool sales. And I'd get home. And I also did all the teen and kids events for the company. And so there were like a few nights where I'd get home at like 11 p.m. after some big, like Veronica Roth at the Castro Theater type deal.
That's a lot of people.
It was a lot of people. And I was reading a lot of stories over and over and over again at these school book fairs because I would do book talks, which for younger kids are really just story times, which was probably the best part of the job. It was really fun. You'd do like 5 story times in like 3 hours, which is, pretty great way to spend the day. With like zero obligation of being an authority figure like a librarian or a teacher has to do. So nice. And I used to read I Want My Hat Back by John Clausen like all the time. Because you can read that one to K through 5th graders and they will have completely different experiences of it. I think it's a brilliant and perfect picture book. And so I was like, why is it so perfect? Like the illustrations obviously, but from the writing perspective, what about it is so immaculate. And I realized from kind of staring at it for hours and reading it over and over again, that it is just a perfect plot boiled down to its most essential parts. There's a character who wants something, they try, they fail, they have a moment of climax and confrontation, and then there's a resolution. And it's just a bear looking for a hat that has been stolen, realizing it was stolen, and then eating the thief. So I wanted to write a book for kids where they felt like they could do that too. Because actually those building blocks, when you take them apart, are each pretty simple. It's like, we'll come up with a character. What's something that character wants? Yes. What's something that could stand in the way of that character? What's the way they either get it or get something slightly different than what they set out for? And then you get to make up your own ending. And so I hope, and what I tell kids all the time is that I'm hoping that they will write their own stories and that they will send them to me, because at the core of that, I'm a very lazy person who enjoys stories, and I just want them to write the stories for me. And I have promised, and I will never to steal their stories. Because one second girl asked was like, "Are you going to take these stories?"
No.
And I appreciated her looking out for her intellectual property. That's
never
fair.
too young to look after your IP.
No. I wasn't mad at the question, but I want to be very clear. I will never steal your stories. I just want you to send them to me.
I just want to hear your stories. But you're right. If you look at the basic structure of a story, especially one that works on you, and I've done this too, looked at a story that I've read and reread and loved and thought, all right, why is this working on me? What is it that does it? In romance, we talk about tropes that we like or character types that we like. And the fundamental structure is somebody wants something, and that's a problem. Yeah. And when you recognize that, there's just so much variation that can happen, but that's the fundamental core.
I would argue that almost every story follows that. Now, I know like Harry Potter is very out of vogue to talk about for very good reasons, but there is one thing that transphobic author did incredibly well to explain exactly this. In the very first book, Harry looks in the mirror of Erised, which is a mirror that reflects back to you what you want.
Right.
And Harry sees family. And I would argue that the entire 7-series arc is just about him finding family, not in the way that he initially thought that he wanted, which was to have his parents back, which could not be accomplished. But in the course of those books, he makes and finds his own family. And so in the end, he gets the thing that he wanted, if not the way that he thought he wanted it.
Yep.
And I would argue too, Crime and Punishment follows the same arc. Raskolnikov is like, can I murder someone and it be kind of okay? And like, nah, man, you can't. And also you're a jerk. But same arc, same idea.
Yep. So true.
I'll never get sick of talking smack about Raskolnikov, who I think is the world's least likable protagonist.
I'm with you there. We could just do the whole hour on that. I'm totally fine with this. Sounds great. So in The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, I know the answer to these questions because I've read it and I've also talked to you before. I try not to do spoilery discussions for an author event, because if you haven't read it and you're listening, I don't want to be like, so then in the end, the ship sinks to the bottom of the sea and this octopus is like, bitches, I'm going to build you a spaceship. It's going to be great. That's
the time no one saw coming.
Yeah, it's a big twist, you guys. You don't see it coming. Sorry, I spoiled that for you. Octopus, spaceship, pirates, gender fluid. It's amazing. Trust me, you want to read this book. Space Octopi. Claudia, you should write that book. Totally. I would read Space Octopi. Bring us your Space Octopi, please. So in the Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, you have characters that all want different things. For themselves and for each other. Like some of these characters are very invested in what other people are doing. How did you take such a core, simple structure and make it so incredibly collectively complex? Like you've got a lot of masts of story here.
Yeah, thank you. I hope it works,
Yeah, it totally works. Trust me. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I did while I was writing it was I tried to think in terms of also an octopus, actually, of like, if this were just this person's story, how would they tell it? What do they think is happening here? How are they the hero of their own story? What is the thing that they're looking for? And how do they or don't they get that thing? And so I hope that the characters feel full enough to contain those kinds of desires and their own narrative truth, the way that they would tell their own story, their own personal mythology, within this greater one that focuses mostly on two of the characters who I feel the most emotionally connected to. But I hope that everyone else in the story can occupy space in that same way and feel like real humans, because that's the thing that we all do, is we tell the story about ourselves, we tell the story about what we want, and its relationship to the truth is variable. Some of us have really close connections between our personal mythology and the truth of our life. Like the crossover is very profound. And for some of us, they're just two circles that sit next to each other. There's like characters with a lot of self-deceit. There's people with a lot of self-deceit. And so,
no, really?
I know. Wild.
What?
And so I hope that the characters in my story represent kind of that spectrum.
Now, when you mentioned that you were emotionally connected to the characters, now I already know the answer to this question, but I don't want to miss the opportunity for you to share this part with the people who are listening. What led you to write this story?
Thank you. It's my favorite thing to talk about. This book was inspired by like one kid in particular. So I was a children's bookseller for 1,000 years, as we've discussed. And in that time, I got to know a girl named Claire. And she would come into the bookstore, and for the first like year or 2 years that I knew her, her parents would do the talking for her. But they'd come back like every Saturday and be like, okay, Claire has read all 3 books that we bought here last week. What books are we buying this week? And we would talk about what might be good, what she liked, what she didn't. And her parents would know ahead of time so that they could talk for her. And then one day she just like ran into the store and she's like, do you like Pokemon? And I was like, oh my God, she's talking to me. This is the best day.
It's always Pokemon that breaks the ice, right?
Yeah. She still likes Pokemon. I asked her about that and she was like, I still like Pokemon.
You got to catch them all.
And finally, like, we worked up our own rapport. And after that, her parents hired me to be her creative writing tutor. And in that time, it became clear, first of all, that she's like incredibly talented and an incredibly smart and sharp and critical reader. But also that she was queer and that there were not the kind of high stake fantasies that she liked to read the best, but never saw her own kind of romances reflected within. And so I started writing this book exactly for her. Where it was just like, this is supposed to be everything that we've talked about that we both love, with like an incredibly queer romance at its center. And so it's sapphic in nature, but one of the characters is bigender, in part because I wasn't sure when Claire was 12 or 13 what direction her gender might take at any moment. She's cis and she's stayed cis up till this point, but at that point I didn't know, so I wanted to make room for any identity she might find. And so yeah, that's very much where it started.
And in doing so, you created a place for so many different people to see their identity and their own narrative in the story. So well done.
Oh my gosh, thanks.
You're so welcome. It's really,
I
really
hope
beautiful thing. It's really, really beautiful because no matter what angle you're coming in from or what piece of your narrative or piece of your identity you're trying to figure out, there's a way to see yourself in one of these characters because they have so many different nuanced permutations of identity and gender and story. And if you think about it, the way in which you define your gender is a core element of how you tell your own story.
Right. And I think it's a part of identity where too often that part of our story is told for us and we aren't consulted. Yeah. And so that was something that I was thinking about a lot as I wrote this, because one of the core themes of the book is about that difference between the story, like what you know about yourself to be true versus what people tell you your story is. Mm-hmm. And every character in the book, regardless of their gender feelings, has an identity that everyone knows about them and an identity that they hold secret. And whether that's like literally a secret identity, like you're literally a spy, or you are a completely different person in the way that you are presented or the way that you've been taught to be. And so everyone has some of that sense. And what I hope is that because teenagers are in the kind of like peak moment of their life where they're starting to figure out who they are without people telling them what they are.
Yes.
And make those decisions themselves. I hope that even if they don't see their exact identity reflected back at them, that they will see that same struggle that they're going through, the same profound job that they're doing right now as a teenager of figuring out who I am on my own accord. They'll see the characters in this story doing it and not being and seeing that like being taken seriously, because I feel like adults have a tendency to make fun of teenagers. And I think
I have too. Yes.
When we do that, what we're really doing is making fun of ourselves when we were teenagers. But the disservice that it does is telling teenagers that these profound things that they're going through for the first time are somehow trivial. Mm-hmm. When they're not. They're confronting huge questions for the first time in their life. It's really serious work. And it's also the work that you do for the rest of your life. It's the work that nations do. It's the work that religions do for the entire span that they exist. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted that to seem as holy and important as I think that it is in the story.
I definitely think that's the case. One thing that I have watched with my own children who are 14 and 12 in the quarantines, as we are all together in the house all the time. they're, like I said, they're 14 and 12, and I'm 45. So the pool of my emotional experience, if you imagine it, a body of water, is quite substantial, because I've had 45 years in which to have emotions, which are sometimes really large waves and sometimes they're like, meh, whatever. Their pool of collective emotional experience as a body of water is much smaller.
Right.
So things that make a big impact have waves that go back and forth and on and on and on. And I'm like, yeah, they have a smaller pool. Their pool will grow bigger. But right now it's smaller, and I have to remember what it was like to be like, I have a really small boat and there's just some big ass waves, and it's a lot. It's really a lot. And when I read how the sea was a character in your book, I thought, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that we forget as adults a lot of the time is that, just like you say, like the body of water is smaller, and so these reverberations are actually bigger. And it's like we aren't experiencing things with the same intensity anymore. So making fun of that is like very cruel.
Oh, it really is. And it's hard to be a teenager. It's also hard to be a teenager committing murder on a gender fluid pirate ship, taking charge of your own story and having to trust people who, could conceivably kill you.
Right.
Low stakes, piece of cake, no big deal.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I hope not everyone is murdering people in order to fit in a toxic masculine environment.
One would hope.
But, if they are, they will see themselves reflected here.
Claudia's like, well, sometimes. Now, I know I have heard it said to me, because I exist mostly in the romance genre. I've heard that it's very easy to write a romance. It is not. And I've heard that it's very easy to write a book, and it's really easy to write a children's book. I imagine that you've heard both of those things.
So my husband is a programmer. He makes apps for the iPhone. And both of us suffer. I think one of the things that we like fundamentally relate on is that we have a job that everyone thinks they can do.
Oh, yes.
Like everyone thinks they have a children's book idea. Everyone thinks they have an app. And the fact of the matter is you're mostly all coming up with the same app, and you're mostly all coming up with the same children's book. Like if I
wish I had a lighter, right? I would just hold it.
Yeah. And so this isn't to poop on anyone in the audience who may be developing a children's book idea, and that it may involve picky eaters or talking animals or rhymes or whatever on a farm. But like, there's certain things that like children's books have done a lot, and people who don't live and breathe in them don't recognize that. And so one of the key pieces of advice that I always give to aspiring children's book authors, of which there are many, is to, this is tough advice right now, but to go to a bookstore and see what the bookstore brought in 3 or more copies. A buy of 3 or more copies indicates a certain amount of faith, probably marketing spend on the publisher's part, probably a publicist who worked their tail off to get that placement, a salesperson who believed in it. And to get a real sense of what it takes to be a professional at this stage, because it's a mature industry at this point, and the people who do it as a career and take it incredibly seriously. And so it should be approached with that kind of reverence, I guess.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And God, whoever said writing romance is easy.
Oh, all the time. I could just do that one weekend. Yeah, no problem.
Oh my God. Okay, so, no, it's not.
No, it's super not.
How hard it is when you have 2 friends and you're like, you two
just kiss.
Just kiss. And like you want them to so badly and they won't. That's what writing a romance novel is like all the time. And you have no one to blame but yourself. And there's a million ways to make it seem incredibly cliche, really stupid. There's weird, like your underpants show, I feel like more in romance than in any other category. Like your own personal demons, like really just like unveil themselves. And you're like, oh God, I guess I have been permissive in this weird way of this particular toxic kind of romantic entanglement. And so, no, romance isn't easy. And I have to say my respect for the genre really came from working at Apple at iBooks at the time. Romance is a huge category for them. And so we would go to these romance conventions to talk to romance authors and kind of figure out what's the best way to partner with you, like, et cetera. And it was a delight. And those women are very, very smart. And I heard the story over and over again of, oh, I used to be a blank, but then I read so much romance and I thought, well, maybe I should try this. And now I do it professionally and my husband works for me. Yeah. I heard that story so many times. And so I was like, ooh, I should try that. And no, romance is really hard. Romance is incredibly difficult. And I will say the romance was the hardest part of writing The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, even though it was the part that I was the most sure I wanted there.
That's really interesting. I was going to
ask
you
that.
To
be a romance. It was always supposed to be circling around these two kids and for them to be very much in love, and for, you get to see it at all the different angles like you do with a heterosexual, romantic thing where the camera swivels all the way around them. And those were the hardest parts to write because even though it has been my experience in real life that sometimes love happens incredibly fast, like it happened very, very fast with my husband. I remember seeing him for the first time and being like, wouldn't it be wild if I married this dude? Wouldn't that be crazy? And then I totally did. Like, there was some part of me that was like already aware.
I get it. I met my husband in high school. We were 17 and we got together when we were 19. We've been together ever since. And he remembers thinking, oh, Sarah would be a terrible girlfriend, but she'd probably be a good wife. Which is why whenever somebody says to me, oh, YA romance is not realistic, be like, hold it. I'll give you one example.
If somebody wrote any of my high school entanglements as a romance novel, it would be a very bad novel.
Big emotions, big waves, big romantic feelings.
Because it's so personal and because it's so different for everybody, I think romance is incredibly difficult. And it hurts my feelings when people say that it's easy, because it ain't. I think what they're responding to is that there are certain beats that a romance novel will hit.
Absolutely.
That are recognizable. And so they're like, that must be easy to replicate. And no, it's not. If that were true, all plots would be easy and Michael Bay movies would make sense.
Oh, yes. Also, sick burn. Yes. I feel that.
I think he can take the heat from me, a debut young adult author.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be too mad. But yeah, you're totally right. There's also I think there's a lot of attorneys that now write romance, because if you're writing a legal paper, if you're writing a legal brief, there is a very specific structure that you have to follow. And you can make whatever argument you want inside, but the structure must hold.
Yes.
And the same is true for whatever genre fiction you're writing. There is a structure and it must hold, but you can do whatever you want inside it.
Yeah.
And that's also the narrative building blocks, right?
Turned romance authors. It's true.
Yeah, there are a lot of them. You should never mess with them. Just trust me on that. Don't. It's just bringing a pencil to a really large cannon fight. If you mess with romance authors, it's a bad idea.
Listen, I think there's a reason why Stacey Abrams should be our next president.
Gosh, I love her so much. Oh my gosh.
I'm a big fan.
So do you have advice for aspiring writers of YA or children's books or any kind of book?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the same advice, which is to read in your genre before you start and really figure out what you have to say. I think one of the things that I did early on that was a mistake was being like, I sold a picture book first. So I was like, I'm a picture book author now. And I tried to only write picture books. And it turns out actually I only have like a picture book idea like once every 2 years. Like I am not constantly churning out picture book ideas. And that doesn't mean that I'm not a full-time writer. But I tried to force myself that way. And I think the real thing I've been learning as my career develops a little bit more and I have more books coming out is that when I gave myself the freedom to be like, you're just a writer, just chase the thing that is the most exciting to you, that you're the most passionate about, the stories that you wake up in the middle of the night being like, aha, now I know what that character would do. Like those are the characters or the stories you should be working on.
Right.
I know that there are some people who give really different advice. And I will say that writing advice is like relationship advice in a lot of ways, where like there are some truisms, like what story is yours to tell is a really good thing to think about all the time. That's true for everybody. Like it's not really my story to tell. about an undocumented immigrant being caught by ICE and like put in a detention center, as well intentioned as I may be. Like that's a thing that's universally true for all of us. We have certain stories that are ours to tell, and those are the ones that we should focus on. But other than that, writing advice, it's make believe the things that have worked for me are to let myself go, to put things aside when they're not working. Like I abandon projects all the time and I feel great about it. And I delete projects all the time. And that feels even better. I am like a cruel Aztec goddess of the delete key, because when I save my writing, I don't allow it to develop. Like if the idea isn't good enough for me to stick with it, then I have learned to just delete the entire Scrivener document that holds it, because the best parts of that story I will remember. There's no sentence that's so precious that it can't be rewritten.
Right.
I'm not writing at that level. Like that, nothing, it's never so perfect, so precious that I can't just kill it. The best parts of it will remain. And so I love recommending to people not to keep drawers. Like you hear about the novel in the drawer.
Or under your bed. Yeah.
I would, if that's not working for you, maybe toss it. You'll remember the best parts. You'll remember the characters you love the best, just the way that you remember people you've met in your life the best, even if you didn't save a photo of them. Like you don't need the relics of writing done categorically at a time where you were less experienced. Any writing you hold on to is always writing from your past. And so you should always be pushing forward as an artist, right? Like you should always be developing and making, honing your craft and getting better and better and better. And so what I have learned painfully is that I just can't hold on to my old writing. It just holds me back. And so I don't know, man, delete some stuff. Feels great. You're like Marie Kondoing your desktop.
And it also allows you as a writer to be defining yourself and your career and your projects solely in the present, that you're not letting your past writing dictate the narrative about your career. Your career can go in any number of directions. Right.
I know that I have heard from other professional writers with bigger and more successful careers than me say it is a good idea to have like a brand, like a type of writing that you do, and to have your social media like presence kind of reflect that. That has not worked for me at all. That's just not the way that I function. It's not the way that I think. It's not the way that I exist in the world. I am just myself on social media with like significantly less farts. And that's just kind of it. Like, and I now handle my writing the same way, because I don't know, as soon as I gave myself permission to bounce around different genres and to just kind of be like, whatever, you write now. I have signed more book deals. I have been more proud of the work that I've done. And I recently just sold a book this year where I told myself, like, officially, if I sell this manuscript, that's it. I write whatever I want for the rest of the life.
Can you tell us about this book a little bit?
It hasn't gotten its like PW announcement. And I just signed the contract for it, but it's a graphic novel and it's script. And it's like a samurai, like lady samurai buddy comedy. I don't know how else to put it. So it's like, it's super goofy. It's super weird. I wanted to be like, what if Xena Warrior Princess were more of a dirtbag? And also, so like that was kind of the direction I took it. Cause I don't know. That's what I wanted to write while I was pregnant. And I had a real blast writing it. And now, I don't know. I want other people to enjoy writing as much as I enjoyed writing that book. Because I do think that when you push yourself to write things where you're like, this is what I should be writing. You have less fun. It feels more like torture. And why do that self to yourself? Because if it sells, then you will torture yourself doing all the edits and the copy edits and everything like that. So when you set out to write a first draft, it should be a delight. Drafting should be super fun. It should be everything that you ever wanted in a story. It should be you letting loose and doing whatever you want. And so, I don't know, man. The feeling of obligation. And I totally understand people who complain about writing on Twitter because writing is a terrible job and nobody should do it. And like crime, it doesn't pay. But it should be fun. Like you're playing in your own imagination. Like you should enjoy that. You're playing pretend.
Yes.
Have fun.
And like you've been saying, you get to define your story. You don't have to let someone else tell you what you should be writing, even your past self. I mean, one of the things I've tried to do is eradicate the word should from my behavior and the language that I use when I talk to myself. You should do this. Okay, why? Why should I do that? Because who said? There's literally 3 other people and 2 dogs and a cat in my house, and none of them give a crap about whatever I just shoulded at myself about. Like I don't have to do anything. So when you were talking about your Samurai Xena Warrior Princess Dirtbag graphic novel, the chat kind of exploded. So we're really excited about this. We would all like this book as soon as possible.
Here's some bad news about illustrated stuff. It takes like 1,000 years to come out. I wrote and sold also an octopus in 2011. Yeah. It went on sale in 2016.
Oh, piece of cake. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a graphic novel script that's coming out next year called Squad from HarperCollins. That's about like a group of teenage girl werewolves who go to parties and target and eat sex pests. And that one took the least amount of time of any illustrated thing that I've ever written to kind of like move through the works. That sold in 2019 and will come out in 2021. So like it takes a while. Long time. Yeah.
I also would like to read that as soon as humanly possible. We are
Tara would like to write.
Yeah, that was Tara in the chat is like, we're not afraid to write. We're not, but we would all like this now. This sounds amazing. Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Was a delight to write.
That one too. Fucking great. It was great. It was so much. Excuse my language. I'm so sorry. If there's any children here, I'm so sorry.
Potty mouth kids, we're sorry.
I was trying to write like a middle grade novel about ghosts because I was like, oh man, I love middle grade novels about ghosts. I should write one. No, I shouldn't. I don't have anything helpful to add there. It kept becoming a young adult novel, first of all, and it was also incredibly scattered and weird. I have since deleted it. And as soon as I let that go, I was able to pursue this idea. And I wrote it in like 2 weeks because I had been just like building and building and building, ready to write it. I'd come up with the idea like 3 years earlier with a more offensive title. It was just going to be called Bitches.
I love this title. I love everything about this title. I think that title is fabulous.
Because I'd always wanted
heavily.
Something about where I went to high school and the way that rape culture was just so much a part of everything. But every time I had tried to write it, it had been so serious and awful and like not something I would want to read. And when I finally gave myself permission to be like, whatever, you do what you want, I wrote that, and it was so much more fun than I'd had writing. And that, I recommend it. I recommend having fun while you're writing. It should be fun in the first draft. You will torture yourself making it better the rest of the time and then promoting it, which is also a waking nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. The promotion part is really hard.
It's just weird. It's like, do you love yourself? Well, get ready to do it in public. And every writer to a T is like, no, I hate myself. That's why I write to escape me. And you're like, too bad.
Now it's going to be you and you and you some more and you as a representative for your work. But it sounds like your overwhelming advice then is give yourself permission to do the thing you want to do.
Yeah.
That's good advice generally, I think.
I mean, I hope so. And like to tie it back to The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, they're not having fun. It's like a high stakes life or death adventure kind of deal. So they're not like, woo! But one of the things that I was hoping readers might find from it is a permission structure for doing the work to find out who they are and to tell their own story with a sense of freedom. And I feel like those things are actually very related, like how you are as a writer and how you are as a person are often very much entwined, because I do believe that quote that like in some ways all art is a type of self-portraiture. And so when you give yourself permission to be your fullest and truest self, you can also give then that same emotional labor that you did doing that pays off in your writing career, where then the words that you create, the worlds that you create are a fuller, more joyful expression of yourself.
Yes. And the longer you let it sit in the crock pot in the back of your brain, the more the collective experience that you have makes the final product so much more nuanced and and flavorful, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, that's the other thing about pushing yourself on ideas that aren't ready yet.
Yeah.
Is maybe you
Stick
can
them in
get
a crock pot and leave them there.
Yeah, like maybe you can get it published. Like, good. That's great. Good for you. Good job. But what are you missing out on? On like, what idea could that have been if you just took longer with it? I wish I could take 20-something-year-old me who was like, if you aren't published before you're 30, like you're a failure, and be like, just shake her and be like, no, you like still have cooking to do, and so do all your ideas. It's fine.
Oh yeah. So I know there's a little area, y'all who are listening, to ask questions, and I welcome your questions. So start asking questions, because I would like to know your questions, because I have more, but I also would like to hear from you. One question I want to ask you is, what books are you reading and that you would want to tell people about? I always ask this question on my podcast. You've been through this before with me, but
I have all new books now to talk about.
It's been like a whole month, so there's more books, right?
Yeah, of course there are. I read constantly. I just read, I want to get the title right because I read books on audio a lot. A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow is about, from the beginning, it's about two best friends who are Black women who live in Portland. So like in a pretty white environment. And one of them, you know, from the top is a siren. Yes. It is very much a meditation on the way that Black women are considered dangerous and they are silenced. But it is also like an amazing young adult novel with like some very cheeky romantic bits and like a gargoyle. Anyway, it's just like such a cool particular world, and I had so much fun with it. So that was amazing.
The Song Below Water.
A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow. It is a delight. If you were like, I read The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, and I'm mad that there weren't more sirens, have I got good news for you? Because there are 0 sirens in The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea. My fault. So, Song Below Water, highly, highly recommend. I read How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, which was great for obvious reasons and was like a good confrontation even for myself. There were some things that I was like, oh, geez, like my well-intentioned things are actually like low-key racist. So it was like nice to be forced to confront those things in a beautiful way. I highly recommend the audiobook of that one because his voice is amazing. I read Clap Before You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, which was beautiful. All of her books are beautiful and perfect. So this book is no exception. Yeah. And I'm reading Pets right now by Akwake Emezi, which is about a like transgender and deaf girl whose identity is actually like nothing to do with the story. Those things just sort of happen passively in the background, which I think is like an amazing writing feat in and of itself, with sort of like a portal fantasy element. And I don't want to say too much because it's very easy to give spoilers for that book, but it is a delight. Ooh. And then I actually recently read one of Sarah Gailey's manuscripts that isn't published yet. And I won't say what it was or anything like that because it's not my place. But like all of Sarah's books, it's amazing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So those are some of them. Yeah. Is that everything that was amazing lately? And I just bought the new N.K. Jemisin book, but I haven't started it yet.
Oh, she's so good.
Yeah.
So good.
So those ones. I'm reading those.
Yeah, that's a list.
Mm-hmm.
So Claudia has submitted a question. Thank you, Claudia. You're excellent. Claudia would like to know if there was any particular pieces of mythology or folklore you found inspiring.
Totally. I stole prodigiously from around the world.
Nice. That's totally your prerogative.
There is a Peruvian myth that is mentioned about... There's like a little oasis in the Atacama Desert with all this like mermaid merch around it. It's like a big tourist destination. People go there to go sand duning now. And the myth is that a god threw a mirror into the desert. It became the oasis, and in it there was a mermaid. So I stole that for pieces of it, not exactly the same. There is the Vietnamese story of the fisherman and his wife, who is a fish that he can't tell anyone about. That one is in there. There is a Buddhist story. This isn't mythology. This is obviously religious, not mythological. But the story that the Buddha tells about grief, which is that a woman comes to him who is grieving, and she's like, "Can you fix this for me?" And he's like, "Yeah, totally. All you have to do is collect 1,000 mustard seeds from somebody who has never experienced grief before in their life." And of course she cannot.
Nope.
So that story is in there. And then there were some that I just made up.
Also, your prerogative.
Like entirely from air, that are like part of the witch's stories that she tells to teach Florian the pirate how to handle the narrative magic of their world. And then there was one cool thing I stole from history from a ghost tour I took in New Orleans. So in the beginning of the book, one of the main characters, Evelyn, is sent to go meet her husband in an arranged marriage that she wants zero part in because she's 16 and also queer. And her parents send her off onto this ship with her casket, all of her belongings stowed in the casket. And that is a thing that apparently French families used to do to their daughters and send them to New Orleans, which is where the myth of vampires in New Orleans comes from. Because these beautiful young girls would show up with coffins.
Yeah, as you do.
Yeah. Oh. So that was a fun one that I enjoyed stealing.
Yeah, steal the heck out of that. That's amazing. Oh, dude. Ooh. Now, can you talk about what you're working on right now?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm sorry. I hate being it's a secret, but but I think it would be low-key unprofessional.
Just tell everyone online. It will be fine. So one of the things that I know that is very hard about the quarantines is that, like we were talking about waves of emotion. I know personally, sometimes I'm like, all right, I'm good. And then sometimes I'm really upset or just despairing or outrageously, furiously angry, or just really happy that something went well. And my older son was accepted into the advanced jazz class. Is there going to be school? I have no idea. But if there is school, he got into the advanced jazz class. Yay, we're all going to have I'm going to make another. Exactly. I have these almost teenage wave height emotions in the quarantine.
Right.
What stories do you tell yourself when you feel like that, when you feel like your emotions are too big? Do you have stories that you tell yourself? No.
The thing that I try to remind myself, thanks to therapy, is that
that's a good thing.
That humans do this. Like we have really difficult times. We have infuriating times. We've seen the rise of an totalitarian state before. So I try to remind myself that actually the bigness of my emotions are not unreasonable, that these are particular times that we're experiencing a kind of apocalypse. The time before this is done. And so I guess it's not a story so much as a reminder that it's not unusual to feel really big emotions right now. No. For me, it tends to run really anxious. My anxious ideation's off the chain. It's just, it's always been bad, but now it's just no relationship to reality. The thing that I try to remind myself in those moments when I'm experiencing completely unbidden fear is that it's really a reaction to very frightening times, and that it is perfectly human and reasonable to be afraid right now.
Yeah. And that you can be comfortable with being afraid. It's a normal thing. You don't have to fear being afraid.
No. And it's a very human response to a very strange time.
Yeah. A very hard, difficult time.
Yeah.
Is there a character in your books that you wish you were most like?
Yeah. Zenobia the witch. The titular witch of The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea. She's not nice. And I do think that my life would be a lot easier sometimes if I were less concerned with not ruffling any feathers. And so there was some kind of wish fulfillment in writing her where she doesn't care. Nope. And it was very freeing to write a character like that.
Yep.
I think she has seen horrible things in her life and has just learned that life has peaks and valleys and that there is never going to be a endless period of ease ever in being alive. And I feel like that's kind of the way that she operates in the world. Yeah. And I would love to have some of that.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I would like to be less scheming than she is, but like I do like
I don't know. You're writing like werewolves that eat sex predators. I think you've got good schemes. I'm on board with all of the schemes that you're crafting here.
I mean, that's not a political platform, I'll be honest.
I don't know. Sounds about as good as some of the others I've heard. I would vote for that very happily.
That one's like a thing that I think about a lot with violence. I just want to be clear is that I never actually condone it. So even in a story like that, where there's some kind of delight in it, where there's something like delicious about imagined revenge, I do hope that it's clear in reading that story and reading this one that I don't take violence lightly and that it always has like this incredibly long and horrifying tale. And even if it is fun to imagine revenge, which I do believe that it is.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody is a perfect arbiter of justice, and power begets abuse. And I just want to be clear about that, even when I'm jokingly talking about this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not actually saying like kill teenage boys, like just do it. That's not a
prescriptive piece of advice. Yeah. Well, I mean, even the crime and the violence and the murders that happen in your book, they have very long-reaching consequences. No one is ever like, oh, well, guess he's dead now. It's not like when you're playing a video game and you kill an NPC and they just dissolve and disappear and you just move on from there. That's not what happens.
There's always a body.
Oh, yeah.
And that's actually like a very conscious decision. There's always bodies because I do feel like that's one of the things that is obfuscated in a lot of young adult fiction, which veers pretty left.
Oh, so much.
Love a book with murder in it. I don't want to be like sounding like I'm prissy or like policing other people about what kind of violence they can or cannot enjoy to write or to read. Mm-hmm. Knock yourself out. And I have enjoyed many murder books. I love the Hunger Games. Like there's lots of books with like a very different kind of wanton violence in it than what I wrote myself. But when I did write it myself, I find violence really horrific. And so I tried to have that reflected in the book so that even if it is exciting and there's these big life or death stakes that, create that sense of like, ooh, turn the pages, who's going to die, who's going to make it. I wanted to be clear, every act of violence in this book is horrible. Even the ones that feel justified stick with characters and are terrible, which is why in the prologue, this is no spoiler because it's in like the first 2 pages and I put it there as a warning to readers. Someone gets their throat slit like in the very first chapter, just so that you are aware that this world is horrible.
Yep.
And so that if you don't want to be in that world, you can leave. Like that's okay. I will never be mad at a reader who's like, you know what, I just couldn't do it with your book. It's too violent. And I'd be like, yeah, that's fair. Like I have so many other books to recommend to you too. Like it's okay. I don't think everyone has to engage with violence if they don't want to.
No.
So I wanted to warn readers right off the bat. That's okay. Like you don't have to stick around. I'm going to warn you right now.
So I know that you've mentioned in your bio that there's baking. Baking has happened. Any baking you'd like to recommend?
If you're interested in trying macarons for the first time, which are my particular specialty, I will recommend starting with the Tasty recipe, even though Tasty is pretty hit or miss on a lot of their baking recipes.
That's really interesting.
Their basic macaron recipe is almost impossible to mess up and is very easy to iterate on. Like you can do it lots of different ways. Like you can add things and change it by like reading other macaron recipes and kind of smooshing them together. But the basics of baking a macaron that don't crack and that aren't empty inside, the two big ways that they mess up, that's a very good one.
Oh,
also good. The Japanese cheesecake recipe they have is very good. The souffle cake.
Yeah.
I made that, and that recipe was, I think I did one less egg than it called for, but it was generally correct.
Ooh, nice. So do you have any recommended macaron flavors?
Matcha green tea is a really easy one. Things where you can change the flavor with a powder instead of with a liquid are great because that doesn't mess with the kind of like the chemical balance of the macaron. And like
coffee,
even
tea,
different extracts will have different results on the macaronage. So like I love like lemon ones are very easy. Lemon extract works really well. But like orange blossom extract, which is delicious for a macaron, the floral macaron flavors are always great, affects the macaronage differently. So you'll mix it less. You might want to use less of the extract than the recipe calls for.
Ooh.
Anyway, there's like a million different things. And I have kept notes in my app of like all the different things that I've tried and the things that worked and didn't. I did this mostly while I was pregnant. I don't think I'm going to have time. Now I have a 4-month-old and I don't have times to be fiddly flirting around with macarons the way that I did before.
Well, if you would like a recipe where you do a thing and then you shove it in the oven and then 45 minutes later it's amazing, the Serious Eats Skillet cookie by Stella Parks, who wrote the Brave Tart cookbook. So it's basically a big honking chocolate chip cookie that you cook in a cast iron skillet so that it gets this really nice crispy outside, but the inside has that softer chocolate chip cookie density. But the key is using malted milk powder because it gives it this really nice sort of semi-nutty caramelly flavor. We have made this thing in the quarantines at least 3 or 4 times, and it is so good. I will say though, if your oven tends to run hot like mine does, cover the top with foil for the last 5 to 10 minutes because it can get a little too dark brown, almost black at the top. Yeah. But holy cow, is it delicious. And you mix it up, you pat it into the cast iron and you just sort of shove it in there and then put foil on the end at the end.
Perfect. So I have 2 limitations, which are that neither my husband or I eat any gluten, which is like kind of, so I have to adjust recipes for, anyway. And the other one is that my husband is also diabetic, so I can't bake cookies. So the thought technology that I've adopted so that I can bake at a regular clip but not kill him is
a kind thing to do, yeah.
Yeah, freezer cookies. So I make a batch of cookies, put all of them in the freezer, and then we just bake 2 at a time.
Yep.
So we can each have 1 cookie and like be adults about it because both of us are monsters. And if there are more than 2 available, we will eat them until we feel ill, and he's literally dying. So
that'll knock off the sugar a little bit. I did an interview with Nalini Singh, who writes wonderful romances and paranormal romances.
I went with her when I was at iBooks. I remember.
Oh, she's amazing. She writes New Zealand thrillers where like the world of New Zealand might kill you. It's really great. But she is also gluten-free, and she sent me a recipe for cheese scones. Her secret is to just substitute almond flour, half almond flour, half gluten-free. And she says the texture works perfectly. So I'm wondering if almond flour
it's what you use for macarons, first of all. And it's also what I use for all of my freezer cookies.
Good to know.
It's like a good crisp replacement. A lot of the other gluten-free flours, for anything that you want to be crispy, will get too soggy because it absorbs fat differently. Anyway, it's a whole thing.
So we have one last question from Stephanie. Yeah. Is there any overlap between your book and baking?
No.
Murder cookies. Murder cookies.
No, baking is very much a thing I do to just be like, that's my hobby. Like I love it. I don't care if I'm good or bad at it. It's like a thing where I have less emotional investment. It's very fun for me to just try stuff.
Yeah, of course. And 30 to 45 minutes later.
Yeah, deadly seriously. And I'm like, when it isn't right, it like drives me nuts. So
not that much overlap.
Not as much as I might hope. I keep trying to figure out a way to write a baking story, and I don't have one yet. We'll figure it out.
It'll happen, and just toss it in the crock pot in the back of your brain. It'll be all
exactly. Good. It's still cooking.
Yeah, totally cooking. Brain cooking.
Sarah, thank you so much for doing this with me.
This has been so much fun. I am so spoiled that I get to talk to you twice. And thank you to everyone who hung out in the chat and hung out with us online. It has been so much fun. I do not know if I have the power to end this. I think that it must be ended by the people in power yep, it's you, right? You have that power.
You're the voice of God.
Yeah, my voice is back. Very mysterious. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. This was such a great conversation. It was great to hear from you. I know I look forward to reading your book. I haven't read it yet, but I'm definitely going to pick it up now.
Oh, thank you.
Again, you can buy it at belmontbooks.com, and you can also donate to Read It Forward so that high school students in this area get to read Maggie's book.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone. Happy baking.
Oh, yeah.